What is going on, Turd Nerds? Matt here with Operator Mindset, and in today's video we are going to be talking all about nitrification, the nitrification process. In the beginning of the video we're going to get into ammonia. What is ammonia? Where's it coming from? How does it get down here? Why do we even care about ammonia? We're going to tell you in just a few seconds. And then we're going to go through the nitrification process. So the nitrification process is the most common and widely used process there is out there because it's biological. It's all natural. We'll get into that. We're also going to discuss the bacteria, the autotrophic bacteria involved in that process because they are a very important part of it. Then we're going to get into alkalinity. Alkalinity's role throughout nitrification is a very big deal. The bacteria are actually consuming alkalinity. We're going to get into all of that in the video. Wanted to clarify a few things though before we get started. Nitrification is a two-step process, and once you complete nitrification you have to go through another process called denitrification. So I just wanted to make sure this is very clear to anyone coming into the industry or just getting started or studying for an exam. You have to nitrify before you can denitrify. Once you get through the nitrification process, we're not done. I'll get into that in the video, but you have to get to denitrification. Denitrification is going to be a whole nother video for a later time. Go look for that one. Hopefully it's out by now. But this video specifically is going to be referring to ammonia and what it's doing coming down here, and then the nitrification process. So the way we are getting that ammonia to a less toxic form of nitrogen. But again, just because we get through nitrification doesn't mean we're done. We have to go through denitrification. That's a whole nother video. Just wanted to make sure everybody was clear. You're not done once you nitrify. You got to keep going through denitrification. Now that we got all that out of the way, let's get into the video. Alright, Turd Nerds, let's start by talking about ammonia. We can't mention ammonia without first mentioning nitrogen. In wastewater, if you don't already know, it is rich in nutrients, so many forms of nitrogen and phosphorus. Specifically, we're going to be talking about nitrogen and how ammonia is being formed from the nitrogen. So, ammonia, as NH3, you should remember that ammonia is NH3. Ammonia is an inorganic form of nitrogen. There are many different forms of nitrogen commonly found in wastewater. They could be inorganic forms as well as organic forms. But referring to ammonia, it is an inorganic form of nitrogen. So now let's talk about the two forms of ammonia you're going to find in water. That is NH4, which is ammonium, and you have NH3, which is ammonia. The NH4 form, ammonium, is ionized. So it is not as toxic as the NH3 ammonia, and it can become more dominant in the water at lower pHs. However, the NH3, which is ammonia, is extremely toxic, even in small doses, and it is in gaseous form. So it's a gas. They are both inorganic forms of nitrogen, and when we say they're inorganic forms, it just means they don't contain carbon. Both of these forms of ammonia make up total ammonia nitrogen, or TAN. I would remember that as well. We are so concerned about this NH3 form of ammonia because of its high toxicity. It is extremely toxic to aquatic life, especially fish. Our job as wastewater operators to take care of the environment. We want to ensure that this NH3 form of ammonia is not being released into our receiving waters. And it's important to note at this point in the video that we as wastewater operators do not want high excessive levels of nutrients like nitrogen and phosphorus entering into our receiving bodies of water because it can cause and lead to eutrophication. We will cover that in denitrification. So where is it coming from? How is this inorganic form of ammonia, NH3, getting down here to us? Well, great question, Matthew. Let me answer that. NH3, or ammonia, is being formed through the breakdown of the organic proteins and things of that nature coming in through your wastewater system. So you doing laundry, taking a bath, food prep, all can contribute to the ammonia load, but the biggest, by far the biggest contributor to the ammonia load coming into your wastewater plant, if you're residential, is the urea or your pee. So when you pee in the toilet and then you flush, hopefully you flush. Mrs. Turd Nerd doesn't like it when I don't flush, so I try to always make sure I'm flushing. Flush daily. The bugs need you. I digress though. The biggest contributor to the ammonia is urea or your pee. When you flush and it comes down here to you, it is breaking down those proteins found in the urea, and that process of that breakdown is called ammonification. Now that we know where the ammonia is coming from, how it's being formed, let's talk about how we're going to deal with this ammonia by converting it to a less toxic form of nitrogen through the nitrification process. Alright guys, so let's break down nitrification. Alright, nitrification is the oxidation of ammonia. It is a biological two-step process that involves both air and specialized bacteria to be completed. To complete nitrification, you have to have those things. So let's break that down. Nitrification starts when ammonia, as NH3, enters your system. That ammonia is then converted to NO2. That's step one. Ammonia to nitrite. Step two is converting that nitrite to nitrate. Remember, I-8. That's the way you got to remember it. Ammonia to nitrite to nitrate, or NH3 to NO2 to NO3. Now to get through that process, that nitrification process right there, you have to have some things in place. You have to have aeration. It requires air. It's provided the air by us as the operators, through our blowers, or however we're aerating our mixed liquor. But that aeration is key. It cannot take place. Nitrification cannot take place if there's no air available. The next thing that it needs in order to complete nitrification is the autotrophic bacteria responsible for that breakdown. Regarding these autotrophic bacteria, they are specialized critters. So we're not actually making them. We don't produce them and put them out there. They're naturally occurring organisms. So they're here on planet Earth already, all around us. But they are autotrophic bacteria, and they are specialized for the nitrification process because autotrophic bacteria can consume inorganic sources and use it as food and energy or carbon. So autotrophic bacteria are able to consume the inorganic ammonia, known as NH3, and use it as an energy source. But they are also consuming things like CO2, which is carbon dioxide, inorganic, as well as bicarbonate or alkalinity. They actually consume that and use it as energy. So that accounts for some of the alkalinity loss in this nitrification process. We'll touch more on that just here shortly. But the autotrophic bacteria are specialized because they can consume these inorganic sources. And because they can use them as energy and carbon sources, that is what is getting us through this nitrification process. It's important to remember that there's many different kinds of autotrophic bacteria out there, genuses, all that kind of stuff. But there's two primary ones that I think you should be familiar with: the Nitrosomonas and the Nitrobacter. Those are kind of the most common ones, but they come in order. They actually have an order just like the nitrification process does. One cannot complete its cycle without the other first completing its. So step one, converting ammonia, NH3, to NO2, nitrite, you need to be familiar with the autotrophic bacteria known as Nitrosomonas. Nitrosomonas are AOBs, or ammonia oxidizing bacteria. They can actually use it as it's an inorganic form of ammonia as a source of energy for them, and convert it to the NO2 form, or nitrite. The Nitrosomonas, completing that step in step one of nitrification, then takes us to step two, where the Nitrobacter are autotrophic bacteria, and they are NOBs, so nitrite oxidizing bacteria. They can convert that NO2 nitrite into NO3 nitrate. That completes our nitrification step. But again, it requires both oxygen and those autotrophic bacteria in that order to complete the nitrification process. Very important things to remember about autotrophic bacteria is they're slow growing. They're super sensitive guys. They are highly susceptible to toxic loads, not enough nutrients in the wastewater. They are also highly susceptible to changes in temperature and pH, which we'll get into in a second. They can often be outcompeted by heterotrophic bacteria, which are just carbon eaters. Don't get them confused into the nitrification step. Nitrification requires autotrophic bacteria. More on those other guys in denitrification. But we have to remember that it takes time for these autotrophic bacteria to establish themselves in the biomass. This could be requiring longer SRT times. So sludge retention time, guys. You have to give them that time to actually reproduce, to consume, to go through the nitrification process, and all the conditions have to be correct for them to actually succeed and then be able to establish themselves in your biomass and be able to continue the nitrification process. So regarding these autotrophic bacteria, remember, they are the ones responsible for this nitrification step. Without them, we can't nitrify. And if we can't nitrify, we can't denitrify. So now that we've discussed them, let's jump over and talk about alkalinity. Now that we understand that process, let's talk about alkalinity's role in the nitrification process. It's important to remember, I've said it before here on this channel, pH and alkalinity, if you're new to the business, they are not the same thing. Does one relate to the other? Yes. Can one affect the other? Yes. But they are two separate things, and it's important coming into this industry to remember that. And that can be confusing, especially when you got all this information out there and you're trying to consume it all like a sponge. Remember that pH and alkalinity, they're not the same. Let's talk about it. The most common definition for alkalinity I think I've heard is the capacity of water to neutralize an acid and resist changes in pH. That is the book broad definition of alkalinity, and that's what's happening. Alkalinity needs to be present in your system because it acts as a buffer. During the nitrification process, acid is being released. It comes in as NH3 and we are converting it to NO2 and then to NO3. That process, the release of that hydrogen ion, is creating an acidic condition. So alkalinity being present in your system will be being consumed to neutralize the acid. The release of the hydrogen in the water is creating an acidic condition, and that alkalinity has to buffer that in order to stabilize the pH. As we said, the autotrophic bacteria, they're susceptible to those changes in pH. If you don't have adequate alkalinity present in your system, you could be creating acidic conditions through the nitrification process, this natural process, and that could be harming your bugs or inhibiting them from completing that process. Another thing to remember about alkalinity is very important, is that for every 1 milligram per liter of ammonia oxidized, it is consuming about 7.14 milligrams per liter of alkalinity. So through that consumption rate and through the potential of them consuming alkalinity as a carbon source, you are losing alkalinity from your system. If you don't have enough already present, you are creating an acidic condition because there's not enough alkalinity present in that to actually buffer the acid being produced and keep that pH stable. Having that alkalinity present and abundant in your system is going to be key for your nitrification process to complete, and that way you can move on to the denitrification step where you will then regain some alkalinity. But let's not get into that yet. So that is it for nitrification. That is the whole process that's taking place, and that's what's going on within your plant to remove that ammonia. Again, it is very important to remember, we're not done yet. All we have done is take that very harsh toxic ammonia, NH3, and we have converted it into a less toxic form of nitrate. We now have to deal with that nitrate, which we will get to in denitrification. So some things I think you should be familiar with regarding nitrification and all the steps involved for your exam would be know that ammonia, first off, is NH3. I would know that it's an inorganic form of ammonia, and I would know that the common biological way to remove ammonia from your wastewater is through nitrification. Be familiar with nitrification, be familiar with the order of which it takes place, their compound names, and also be familiar that it's an aerobic process and that it requires autotrophic bacteria. Know which autotrophic bacteria come first in the steps and what they're responsible for completing in that process. I would also be very familiar with alkalinity's role in that nitrification process, along with that 1 milligram per liter consuming 7.14 milligrams per liter of alkalinity. Be very familiar with that. Those are the things I think you should be most familiar with regarding this process. And there you have it, guys. That's nitrification. I hope you found this video useful. I hope it was able to clarify a few things for you and break it down, because I know that the influx of information and trying to understand nitrification, denitrification, pH, alkalinity, all that can be just so consuming and overwhelming. It's gonna be okay. You got this. If you found this video helpful, give it a thumbs up. Leave me a comment. Let me know what you might like to have seen more of, or what maybe something you want to see coming up, maybe a future video. Please do. I'd love to respond. I love getting y'all's input. And always make sure you are subscribed to the Operator Mindset channel. We put out videos just like this to try to help you guys getting into the operator's lifestyle, breaking into the industry, or if you're just an operator like me and you love what you do, you love being a turd nerd, you love expanding your vast knowledge of this trade. Thank you guys so much. We'll see you on the next one. Turd Nerd out.